I had a clear run relative to my cousins, but my cousins are me. We're just all the same. We come from the same grandparents. I had a really sort of working class background. My dad was worked at Fisher and Paykel and then became a taxi driver. So why did I get such a clear run in terms of social challenges, family challenges, economic challenges? It seemed to me unfair that my cousins suffered while I got a clear run for me to explore and realise my potential, and that the majority of my cousins didn't. And I always knew that I would want to be in service. So the impact I want to leave is I want to move the dial for our people, to give our people more options than what they have today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ways to Wealth. Today I'm joined by Matt Mudford. Matt, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what you get up to?
Kia ora. Huria hou no Ngāpuhi me te raroa, no hokianga hou ko Matt Mudford tōku ingoa. Born and raised in South Auckland. On my mother's side I'm Māori. Grandparents hail from the far north. And on my dad's side, Pākehā, hail from Somerset in England, and so that's where my ancestry come from. Yeah, I'm currently the CEO of Ngāpuhi Asset Holding Company, which administers the economic assets for Ngāpuhi, by population largest iwi in New Zealand. So yeah, privileged to be here.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's been great to get to know you over the last kind of wee while, and we've had a few great chats about, where we see the world going and, how to create empowerment for groups of people and kind of going back to this more decentralized, pre-industrial kind of environment, going back to the village concept.
Yep.
And it's really been cool to get to know you and then talk about that. So I think it's gonna be awesome to talk about that on the pod today.
Yeah, awesome.
And you're obviously now taking the reins of a pretty lean organization. I think that a lot of people might actually go, oh, well, that's actually there's a lot going on there. Yep. There's some big assets. You guys must have loads of resources and all this stuff. And it's like, well, you're coming in to make a change, right?
Yep. Yeah, so Ngāpuhi, lots of iwi have different contexts, and a lot of the context of those iwi have settlement around the Treaty of Waitangi has a backdrop, and Ngāpuhi is the largest sort of unsettled iwi or iwi that hasn't settled, and so we have in our group about $100 million in assets, but as you say, we are the asset holding company that looks after the lion's share of those assets is really lean. We've only got 2 FTE at the moment and a small board, but we are looking to grow our asset base, which is our primary mandate, and resource it appropriately to realise our aspirations. We've got big goals that aren't tied to that settlement. That settlement is something that's outside of our control. Right. It's between the Crown and our people. I administer the assets of today, and so it's been lean for good reason, but we're in a position where we can start to change direction and build our asset base in new ways and look to resource that appropriately. So yeah, it's a lean organisation at the moment.
But I think that's cool, right? Like that, I think that's appropriate. I think that's really important. Lean board and then a couple of people actually that are really doing the work to see changes better than seeing, a bunch of FTEs in a room having a chat. Yep. And maybe seeing less real change. So I think that's really cool. And I think that we don't see a lot of that actually in the kind of more, I wouldn't call, the iwi is not a philanthropic endeavour. It's actually an opportunity to create equity for Māori and create an infrastructure that, we've seen work in many multi-generational families. Governments, dynasties, etc. What makes you most excited about the opportunity?
I think it is the potential. I've mentioned this before, but we're a few years away from 200 years since the signing of He Whakaputanga, which was the founding document of New Zealand, the Declaration of Independence that Ngāpuhi led the signing of, and then 5 years later, the Treaty of Waitangi. For lots of reasons that we won't go into in the pod, we haven't realised those aspirations as a country. That spirit of partnership, our people wanted when we signed, but the opportunity is, we've got a really young tribal population, and we've got land in the north as well. We're primarily in the north, our takiwa. So we're loaded with potential. We're loaded with young people, and we also have, due to our sort of large tribal base, we've got lots of successful Ngāpuhi out there who are doing great things out there in the world. And I think I'm excited about, harnessing a lot of that talent and goodwill and aspirations heading to 2040. The 2040 is going to be a significant time for New Zealand. We're going to reflect on 200 years as a country, and Ngāpuhi sits right at the centre of that. And I'm excited about what in the next few years we can achieve with partners alongside Crown and with commercial partners to demonstrate what those aspirations manifest.
What it actually means in real
practice,
life.
it hasn't lived up to the aspirations, and we sit in an opportunity where, settlement aside, we're still the treaty partner today. We're a growing demographic. We're about 200,000 tribal members, very young, very fertile, and so we're going to continue to grow, and I'm really excited at the opportunity to build an asset base, but also be alongside our people who want an economic future as well. A lot of our tribal members are, aren't super wealthy. Things haven't panned out as we would want, but I think, there are all those opportunities, and it's an exciting time. There's lots of global changes happening in the world, but that, some of that uncertainty creates some opportunity
for sure.
And it's about utilising some of the knowledge and networks to take advantage of that and not be on the other side where we've been, which is devoid of that opportunity.
Like information asymmetry.
Exactly.
And kind of not in the right rooms at the right time.
Yep.
Potentially being left out of those opportunities.
Totally. Yep. Totally. And as you say, like the barriers are dropping in some instances. AI and that is an enabling tool.
And then how do we make sure that compute is available to everyone?
Yeah.
Right? Potentially that's an interesting one, because I was speaking to a friend of mine, Brother D, who works in Monaco.
Yeah.
And he was chatting to us about coming and seeing what they're doing, and they're like trying to work, to build more people into tech, especially Māori and Pacifica. And he said to me, and I think I take it for granted, is the access to hardware is not like, I've got my iPhone here, I've got my MacBook, my kids have their tablets and they have their MacBook or whatever they've got around the house, and we just, think, oh, well, it's just a device.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not just a device.
No, it's
and actually, the MacBooks, they got different chips that now all of a sudden make much more of a difference than your standard laptop chips as well.
Yep.
So the compute divide is interesting, right? Because you've got compute that's more accessible, more people can get online, etc. But then what about the powerful hardware? And what does that mean? Yep,
exactly. And the cost of energy is a limiting factor. If we, at the moment it is, when you're talking about, big investment, but if we can get to a point where we can drop energy, fusion comes along, and you drop, the ability for people to be entrepreneurial because they have both compute, and the cost of energy isn't as much of a barrier as it's always been to constrain production. The potential is great, and to be able to support, our people to hopefully get on that entrepreneurial path one day would be great. And some of those changes are happening, and it sort of helps us potentially move the dial beyond where we've come from, which has been resource constrained
and information constrained.
Yeah.
That we call it intelligence now, right? Like the average human can generate 5 million tokens a year working. Tokens. We're thinking in tokens. What are tokens, I guess? Tokens are information that the AI is reading, processing, and then distributing a response, and it takes a bunch of tokens for it to do that. And as a human, we create tokens in our thoughts and our work that we're doing when we write emails and stuff, and it's like $36 or something to generate 5 million tokens right now.
Which is great, right? And the practical applications for that sort of thing is like what some of the constraints for Māori land, which is underutilized. I mean, there's a myriad of challenges, but part of it is if you're going to get an investment over the line, the cost to get business case off the ground, or to get due diligence done, or any financial modeling.
Legal bills.
Yeah,
just
right.
the insight of what policies you might be impacted
exactly right.
by.
You could be, just to get something off the ground could cost you $200,000, $250,000, and when you've got a multiply owned land block, that's a lot of money to pull together, or you're relying on Crown to fund that. Whereas with these tokens, you can get 80% of the way to a pretty decent sort of business case with the power of all of that information. That's the cost is lowered, and the you don't rely on a key person having a really technical business capability or something to progress it for free on a voluntary basis. You can, instead of having to pay consultants, you can actually get more investment ready utilizing some of that compute. So there's some of the practical things that can help to unlock our productivity in the north.
Well, and that's super interesting. And actually, it's the dynamic of New Zealand from a kind of commercial and services perspective, very service heavy.
Yeah.
So even if we look at your organization, you are 2 FTEs, you don't actually have that deep expertise internally. Therefore, in New Zealand, we typically go to consultants, and that's where there's a huge industry, right? Is around selling knowledge, basically. That actually created in a sense, it created an inflated environment for selling services, because the internal companies didn't have that expertise. Therefore, service providers had more leverage.
Totally. Yeah.
And now that's becoming a little bit more challenged, and it creates this weird dynamic for New Zealand because we have a relatively low population. So it means that our businesses are not necessarily at that kind of scale, potentially, if they're just operating locally.
Yes.
Which has always created a bit of an issue. I always thought about that when I looked at media. And I always thought, well, if this was a really free market, like none of these, like the NZ Herald and stuff, none of it would exist.
Yeah.
Because it couldn't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the ability to generate the eyeballs, to generate the revenue through the advertising. So it's kind of essentially subsidized.
Yeah.
And I guess that now becomes very interesting when it comes to knowledge. Conversely, I think that you're still relying on external knowledge. So how do you try and keep that core knowledge and understanding in organizations?
Totally.
Especially with something like what you guys are doing, where actually it's about vision and culture and what you're trying to actually genuinely create over many, many years.
Yeah.
In fact, to really get the job done, there may be tribe members that never actually realize the benefit of what Ngāpuhi actually wants to deliver as a collective.
As a collective, yeah.
How do you find getting alignment, among so many different stakeholders? It almost reminds me of a DAO. Like a decentralized autonomous organization.
No, that's and that's been one of the biggest challenges for Ngāpuhi. It's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, some iwi have been able to settle their grievances because they've got a lower base. We've got a massive base, and we've got a very diverse tribal membership base. So it is difficult. And has been sort of one of the challenges in our ability to progress. But I guess one way that we think about it is that we tupuna inspired and mokopuna led. So we look to our tupuna and what they did, and say He Whakaputanga and things like that as sort of guiding lights. The aspirations that were captured in those documents, and mokopuna. What are the dreams and aspirations of our young ones today? That's probably those things you can't debate with our tupuna. They wrote in stone what their aspirations were, and our mokopuna today are our young ones are the most vocal around what they want. So that is, rather than the rest of us that are sort of in the middle, those voices are really powerful, I think, that we're looking to lean on. Yeah, they're growing.
Is that mainly on social, or?
It's social. We also, have various sort of rangatahi forums for them to be a part of our governance processes and things like that. So I think those are some of the ways that we're trying to align. Like I've sort of demonstrated, lining up to key dates like 2035 and 2040 are important, and aligning around certain values. So the idea of sovereignty is really important to our people. So finding those common areas of interest, because there's overlapping interests as it relates to land and lots of different things, but we, at a high level, we are aligned. We want prosperity, and we want a level of sovereignty and self-determination.
Self-sovereignty, right?
Self-sovereignty. So both at a tribal level, because, say, for example, with He Whakaputanga, that was our sort of sovereignty manifest. But if you take it down a level, as we've discussed, it's like, what does economic sovereignty look like at the whānau level? And those are the sort of things that I'm keen to explore with people, and that's why entrepreneurialism is really important, because we all want sort of tribal sovereignty in a sense, but I think we also want economic sovereignty, and to me that comes back to the whānau unit. What does that look like? And a lot of that means for us it's about having a place at home back in our tribal lands that they can go to, the ability to gather kai. All of these sort of things are important elements to that generally speaking our people really align on. Like, we want the opportunity to, but ultimately, for example, 25% of multiply owned tribal land is landlocked. So some of the stuff so you can't actually get to some of our tribe, the lands that our whānau or hapu get to. So there are barriers in the way in order to realise that sovereignty, where you actually can go and visit your land because it's landlocked. So how do we
explain like why that can't be solved, or what the solution could be? Yeah.
I think so. There's a few different parts to the puzzle. A lot of it is sort of political and has a legacy as to where we've got to. But there's organisations like Te Tumu Paeroa who administer some of those landlocked lands that don't have governance structures and things like that. I think it's about coordinating with partners. Like Te Tumu Paeroa would be an important one. There's lots of whānau and hapu land blocks in the north that do have governance structures but lack capital. And it's about sort of having a collective framework where we can unlock economic productivity to enable access, so that you could build a solar farm that would pay for a road to get to those blocks or things like that. But ultimately, if they're just dormant or just sitting there, then they just can't produce.
It's basically an underutilized asset, right?
It's an underutilized asset, so it's trying to find the ways in which we can unlock that. And for example, Te Tumu Paeroa would be a partner, and they do this around the country, but it's not going to be one organisation that's going to help to solve that problem. It's going to be part legislative, it's going to be part council and rates and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of multi-layered, but I think there's a lot of sort of goodwill out there and people wanting to sort of solve that problem, but it is a legacy challenge for us. And so in the meantime, we do sort of prioritise things like meaningful employment, trying to invest in businesses that create jobs and things like that. So it is a challenge, but that's some of the ways that we sort of would approach it.
What do the younger people in the iwi, what are some of their aspirations? How do they see the world, and is there optimism? Is there frustration? Is there a key sense that you get at the moment?
Our young people want opportunity. They live in a digital world, right? Our people love devices, they love gaming, the things I see them attracted to, entertainment, creative arts,
music.
Yeah, music. Our people sort of are overrepresented in some ways in some of those places and spaces. So that's it. But if you sort of take a step back, and as we talked about with that sort of family, parents want to raise their kids and give them all their opportunities. And for lots of reasons, a lot of our families our kids, don't have access to those opportunities, whether that's, access to devices or education pathways and things like that. But I think, that we want the same things as everyone else.
Yeah.
But some of
a lot of people want to be YouTubers.
Yeah. That's one of
an influencer.
An influencer.
That seems to be
that's a massive thing.
A real big thing, right, for young people.
Yep.
I think about my kids and stuff too. I had an interesting one the other day though with my daughter, who's 9.
Yep.
And we were grooming my dog. She's like, I'd love to be a groomer, I'd love to be a dog groomer when I grow up. And I was like, well, why don't you start a dog grooming business? And she was like, oh yeah, I should. And then she started building this site because she wanted people to be able to book in to book.
Yep.
And she was using AI to create the website. Okay. And she was like, I need to have a form so that I know that if the dog doesn't like being groomed, I can be careful.
Yep.
And these things. And it's like giving her the opportunity to feel like she had some agency, over what she was creating, and giving her the permission to say, well, you don't have to just do a task. You can have control over that task and your ability to contribute to people. And then how are you going to build up your expertise so that people actually pay you.
Yep.
Because you've only done RDog and twice.
Yeah.
So you're going to need some practice.
Yeah.
And I think the apprenticeship model, especially and I hate to say it, in New Zealand, is that there did seem to be, especially when I was in the jewellery trade. I was a goldsmith for about 10 years. I trained in the UK when I lived there, but I moved when I was young, and I'd been in the jewellery trade, and I noticed that there was a real lack of desire to train apprentices. And I do feel like because we have this mindset here sometimes around it being a small, limited market, that there is a hesitation to train people or to back people because you're worried that they're going to take some of your lunch.
Yep.
And that's really hard, right? And I think that right now, that's all I hear, especially with AI, is, well, I'm not taking on a young person.
Yeah.
Because I can get AI to do it or whatever. And it's like, well, Stanley Druckenmiller, who you were looking at on my screen, he says, and he's one of the greatest investors of all time, he says you always need to have young people around you.
100%.
Because they are bringing you the next perspective.
Yep.
And they don't have the scars yet. And that's really important. They're not jaded. They've got the curiosity. And I think that in kind of traditional, industrial kind of constructs, right? It's all about not asking questions and sticking down the path and kind of stepping on that agency a little. And now we don't even see too far into the future because everything moves so quickly. We don't want to give people the next opportunity. And I say to everyone in our network of like, you have to be looking how can you back someone that doesn't have experience but is really keen to learn? Because if you don't, and you talk about, well, we need to create more renewable energy or things need to be fairer, I agree, but how are you able to influence someone learning and giving someone that agency? Which after this podcast, I'm meeting someone and I'm like super keen on how do we give them the experience, because it's the experience that they lack, and it's the experience that everyone kind of disregards younger people on. Which is a shame.
No, it's a real challenge for our country. With the kids that have come through COVID, their expectations around work and their opportunities, they're coming to recruitment events where big traditional firms that would take on big internship cohorts and graduate cohorts. It's just not the same environment anymore. And the challenge that we face is those people. We still need succession in all of our businesses.
Succession is one of our biggest challenges in New Zealand.
And we need young people to help, not only be a part of those organisations, but to adapt those organisations in due course. And so I feel the same way about, giving people that work experience. I'm sort of hoping to take on some form of internship at some point within our organisation, because it will present as a risk. It's a bit of a lazy answer to be, to take that. We're not going to hire young people at the moment, or because AI is going to do it. That's really short-sighted, because as you say, some of the characteristics that they have actually are going to be a part of what's going to adapt your organisation to be more sustainable over time, because they are going to be more literate in the key risks that are going to shape up, and they will one day run these organisations. Many organisations will still be resilient through time, but you need that succession and those pathways, and I see that as a big risk. We need to be continuing. I know that's what you and some of the team do, have a really good model around that, but I see that as a massive thing.
It's never been a better time to be really good at learning to ask questions.
Yeah, agree.
That's actually like the big unlock.
That's the big unlock.
Right? Because we all have felt really trapped or really unhappy with our situation at one point in our lives. And, I remember 14 council estate in the UK under a garage, having some sort of meltdown on my own when I was 14. I remembered feeling like, I'm never going to feel this trapped in again.
Yeah, wow.
But I had no LLM to ask for practical advice about how to get out of my situation. I just knew I wanted to be out of my situation. Yeah, that old model was all about not asking questions. Yeah. But this new world is about actually you can ask as many questions as you like. And you can, for the most part, get some feedback. I think the challenge is working out when you're hearing what you want to hear versus what you need to hear and what's true.
Yeah, totally.
So getting really good at asking those second order questions.
Yeah. Some of the LLMs can be a bit sycophantic and a little bit like, oh, you're doing a great job.
That's
so,
right.
Well, actually, you need to be again those second.
That's a great question.
yeah.
How many times does it start with that?
You keep telling me that.
Yeah, stop telling me I do ask you. How do you see like the kind of interplay with kind of your basics? You're getting back to your basics of like financial literacy, saving for the future where it feels, I guess, more inspiring and like you're having an impact, right? Because I think that, we've definitely seen a trend over the last 10, 20 years of kind of asset gathering, right? And a lot of passive products and a lot of capital going into passive products, and that, and that plays its role. It has a place, but it's not creating capital. It's kind of, again, not got as much agency as like an SME or something that you're actually contributing to. Like I can invest in Tesla, but I don't have an impact on Tesla, you know? Whereas obviously if I own my own business or I have agency over my income somehow, like maybe I'm bonused from sales or something, right? I can then impact. How do you feel about kind of trying to build frameworks around kind of holistic thinking around like actually what is wealth and how do you build it?
I think about that sort of stuff a lot. Financial literacy is important. I was lucky to be brought up in a household where I got, mum she'd buy me like Mary Home books and I'd read them, and so I had an appreciation, despite the fact that my family didn't have a sort of massive economic base. I drew inspiration and I think one of the challenges that we face is that so many of our people don't, are sort of, or families are, sort of paycheck to paycheck. So the ability to look past the sort of immediate horizon is challenging, because you can teach all you want about compounding interest, but it doesn't land until you can see it and feel it. Because if you don't have any savings, you can't. Even those building blocks of financial literacy around compound interest as a starting point, some people don't even get the opportunity to experience what that might look like because they just don't have that financial base. But I think that there is an opportunity where we can. I remember when I got my first shares, it was when Mighty River Power sold down and there was like an open market offer and public could sort of get in on it, and my mum sort of helped me out with it. So there was like a window, but now things are a little bit more accessible. You've got platforms that, that make it a little bit easier, for the entry point's a lot lower. There is a way for people to invest into asset classes, and even thinking about, that social media and influencer, those business models, the entry point's so low. Everyone's already got the device. I can self-record myself. Back, let's call it 30, 40 years ago, that institutional framework of how to save and invest and start a business, the barrier to entry was so high. We now live in a world where the barrier of entry is quite low, and the asset mix is quite large. I think from a Ngāpuhi perspective, it's our job to provide entry points for people at different stages. So, for example, for us, thinking about an iwi saver concept where we can start to because our people might not have the money today to make their own savings, to learn about the compounding interest concept, we do it for them. We can seed money for them, and we can demonstrate to them by way of investing it through funds and not just in sort of
private assets.
And we can start to. We can reflect good practice, but make it a bit more tangible. So there's actually because what they might not be able to do themselves because they don't have the capital base to put money away every year or every month or whatever that may be, we can demonstrate and show them good practice by having an investment model that has a tangible connection to their reality and ultimately us building a portfolio that is blended and balances risk and reward. I think that's our opportunity. That's how I sort of think about it, because we can't solve for the fact that people don't have, capital to start, even a dog grooming business, perhaps. It's not, even though that's a reasonably low barrier to entry. For some, it is just that, those thousands of dollars it might take to get something off the ground might be too tough. But we can still find ways to try and demonstrate, to show how to fish, I guess.
How to barter, right, as well, I think, is like how do you be industrious when you may not have the assets to even start the work. You might not have the hammer and the drill or whatever, right? And you need to make that initial investment. But you might have to beg, borrow, and steal, right, in the beginning. And it's like, how does that happen? How do you have the courage to ask? I know that apparently Virgin Atlantic was started without any capital.
Yeah, wow.
They just leased the Boeing 747. Luckily, Richard Branson basically just rang up and was like, "Hey, have you got any lying around?" And that's a good example of like working out, the first principles.
You don't always need money to make money.
Of being like, oh, I need it. I need money. And a lot of startups, especially while money's been easy, and over the last few years, like I'd say 5 to 10 years, it's been very much like that, right? Oh, well, I need capital to get started. I need an investment. And then you obviously find that there's no, it's not evenly distributed. Depending on where you come from, the education you have, where you worked before, perhaps your kind of family network will definitely influence whether or not you get capital. And you see that both from, the types of people that are getting it, but also from a gender perspective as well. Totally.
And I sort of mentioned it at the start, we've got a huge tribal membership base, and we actually do have successful entrepreneurs, and I'm really excited to hopefully be able to start connecting with them and sharing those stories with our people that, some of these people have venture-backed businesses, which again are low capital, because you're taking on other people's money, right? And so there's multiple entry points, and I think Ngāpuhi, one thing I want to unlock is to be able to tell those stories of those people who have created economic sovereignty at different levels. It might just be, I've saved a deposit for a home. That might be someone's version of their economic sovereignty. But there is actually more than just that within our tribe that's out there that I'm excited to connect with and ultimately unlock, because, we do have people who have found ways. Our tupuna were entrepreneurial, and we're the earliest traders. That was the whole reason why we signed He Whakaputanga, was so we had a flag so we could enter into port.
It was negotiating collectively, right? And bartering for the outcome you wanted. Now,
exactly.
The problem there is, I think, that you had an asymmetry of information.
Totally.
That then led to corruption ultimately, and the intentions of one side not being met.
Yeah, totally.
And that happens in business all the time. I mean, we've experienced that as being a small company, multiple times in our short existence so far. Sometimes it's just an asymmetry of information that's the problem. Because how do you make good decisions if you don't have all the information?
Totally. And again, going back, if you can build strong AI advisors, who can bring multiple lenses.
Yeah, interesting stuff. What are you most excited about over the next kind of 2 years, you think?
Yeah, for us, it's fairly new in the role. Yeah. Election year is this year, so we'll sort of see what that sort of shakes out to be, and who we'll be dealing with on that side. But ultimately, in the theme of that economic sovereignty, we are, again, not waiting for settlement to determine our economic future. We are on the journey to raise a fund alongside other investors to start making more, not just more investments, but larger scale investments, So I'm really excited. We've been sort of seeding the idea and getting really positive feedback from an aligned investor profile. And I'm really excited. So I'm hoping that we can, in 12 months' time, we'll sort of have something to show for it. But we're really excited about the aligned interests in trying to solve for the same problems, which is how do we start to do some investments with some higher returns? How do we do some investments that are more tangible for our people? And how do those investments be of service of our mission? But it's not Ngāpuhi going it alone. It's Ngāpuhi alongside investors and partners that have shared values, shared vision. And that's what I'm really excited about. I've been in the first few weeks been out connecting with a bunch of people like you guys, and I've had a really warm response. I think people see the potential quite quickly when they sort of get an understanding and are quite refreshed by the. Settlement will take its course, but settlement doesn't...
It's out of your control.
Yeah, and it doesn't define us. It doesn't define who we are. Like I say, we've got these 200,000 fertile uri and a growing educated cohort of those as well. We've already got successful ones out there as well. There's a lot to be excited about in that space. And so having a fund that embodies that more self-determination rather than being held to the crown for our economic prosperity as a collective, I think that's exciting. Just in principle that we're going, actually, that will happen, but we're not, because people always ask when Ngāpuhi comes up, they go, where's settlement at? And I think people are quite, when I say, well, it's not really part of my thinking, that excites other people, and the response that I've got is what excites me, where other people sort of go, cool, that's awesome. How do we help? How can we be a part of that story? How can we be of service?
It's kind of like waiting for inheritance, right?
It is. But it could be like succession where, the rug gets pulled out from under you at any point. There's no guarantee it will happen. There's no timeline. That ancestor may never, they might lock it away from you, and that's gone.
It's hard. You've got to kind of put that cup down in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because, you have the treaty, you have everything in place. You're trying to get the outcome that I think was intended in the beginning. But time has passed, and time in deals, right? In commercial deals, the longer anything goes on, the harder it is to get finished, and that always becomes an issue. When you're talking about having a future where the tribal members feel like they have an impact, like there's a real tangible, dare I say it, benefit, or, and I think this is not an uncommon problem to try and solve, right? We see it everywhere. Organizations, you've seen the internet try and do it through cryptocurrency and DAOs and stuff, and you see issues along the way. I think it's a really hard problem to solve of like collective prosperity.
Totally.
I guess the human side of us is the problem, maybe.
Yeah, part of it. While Māori and Indigenous values can be, slightly different from most, we are in some ways, if you wanted to make a comparison, we are like a family office, but we just have 200,000 beneficiaries of what we call tribal members.
I think it's so exciting. I think it's so exciting. The idea of having a tribe that you belong to. And obviously we can do that in our own ways. We try and create our own tribes in life, right? Through community and activities and stuff like that. But being a part of something that's bigger than yourself is the biggest privilege, right? And then being able to actually contribute to it. I think one area that's I think we should all learn from, right, that has done it as well, is the open source community in software development. Probably one of the best places you've seen decentralized contribution at scale, right, where lots of people are giving to the ecosystem of that software that they're contributing to in a really cool, it's all about, you're producing something, people are reviewing it, and then they're approving it, and then the software gets updated. Right. So the open source has probably been the best kind of at scale thing we've seen when it comes to I guess watering a garden, right? Good code base is a garden that you're constantly trying to improve. And when you get to do that at scale with other people that you may have never met. But you're all trying to actually move towards the same goal. It's cool. I wonder how. I wonder. There's probably something bigger. There's probably something you can go deeper on, right? And really look into what's worked in open source. Because I think it's the only thing that I can think of.
So the mission
it's really done well.
It's about trying to, like I said, we're Tupuna inspired. So our collective models. If we talked about land ownership, there was always a conflict because we're multiply owned versus private property rights. It was always an initial challenge. But now in the sort of modern world, how do our collective values, what are those models and practice that allow us to build something where, like, for example, on the iwi saver side, right? If we could not only contribute to people's savings, but they could contribute their savings into a fund that we can then reinvest into projects. And, so there's all those sort of models that some iwi have taken some. So there's sort of not just a give out, but also a give back. And I think we're just at the precipice of really figuring out what are those opportunities. And so keep a really open mind around how the modern economy actually has some of those foundational models around how we can service our collective, identity and our collective economy in some ways, right?
And what do you think the biggest challenge is?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I reckon it's a bit like in society as well. I think a low institutional trust. And I think our people, whether it's through the COVID thing or whatever, I think some of our people, there's, trust challenges there. So there's internal trust challenges, but there's external, Crown and commercial partnership trust challenges. So ultimately, I think our people, if we could sort of enhance institutional trust, period, with our people, and that's us building an organisation that they can trust, that we're alongside partners that they can trust in, and that we hold Crown partners to account in a way that they trust us to do. I think that's our biggest challenge, is because if our people trust us and our people trust the people that we work with, we can just galvanise a lot of support and interest. But I think part of that challenge is, institutional trust, and that's multi-layered, intergenerational mistrust of institutions.
It's an intergenerational thing, right? It's a subconscious.
Yep. Whether banks, Crown, whoever, there is a low level of trust in all of these things, and then sometimes we can be a part of that because of our commercial partnerships, or our investments, and or personalities. And I think we're at a chance where I think the young people, have a different lens on that lack of institutional trust. They haven't suffered directly from Crown grievances,
and in a way that's harder. Because the actual harm, it's there. It's a subconscious pain.
Yeah, it is.
So it's actually harder to put your finger on it. So it's almost like kind of being gaslit.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't really know, but something's not right. And that's actually worse.
Yep, totally. It is hard. And I think there's no silver bullet for that, but the way that our people have always done it is what we call wānanga and engagement. It's being present. It's about being available. It's about showing up at wānanga, at events where our people are. That's a part of the fabric. Having a cup of tea is sort of like the go-to trust building thing in our culture. It's if there's that's the best way to build trust, is having a cup of tea, and that's sort of part of my job. It's part of everyone who works for our tribal institutions. It's being open. We're not a closed, but we're an open book. That's part of our role, in the same way we expect that of our commercial and government partners too. When we show up, we're showing up together. We show up and we're open to questions and things like that. That is just a sort of lower level tactic that we have to use, and is the right thing to do, to be held accountable, so that it's not just through AGM processes or those sort of formal mechanisms. We have to be open. So we're starting our social media, so that there's an open communication channel there.
You guys should do a podcast.
Yeah, we're thinking about what that might look like. There's lots of really cool stories out there that I'd love to share. So finding the right format will be.
We talk about it in our business. We say, sometimes there's going to be one of us needs to carry the other one. Or if you're in a founding team of 2 or 3 people, it's cyclical. I might be tired one day, or I might get hit with something. I might have a family issue I have to address, right? And I think that it's always good to do it with other people, especially when you can spend the time to build that trust. And I think that being lectured is difficult, right?
Totally. But on a platform like this, it's pretty open. There's no PR thing going on here. It's just an authentic conversation, and so I love the podcast format. I think it's great, and
long form's good, right? Because one thing I get really frustrated at when I see politics in New Zealand is that it feels like everyone is just gunning for that 60-second clip that's going to go viral on TikTok. And it's like, how about you just talk to me for 60 minutes or 40 minutes or 30 minutes? Because like you say, if you go down, if you go and sit with someone and you have a meal with them, or you have a drink with them and you chat for 40 minutes, Whereas if you're just always going, okay, well, what's my next hook for my 60-second video so I can get another 5,000 views? I'm guilty of it, like with motivational content. Right? I love a good motivational content. I love a good hook when it comes to that, of like something I'm like, I believe. But if I listen to 30 of them in one sitting, I'm just like rotting my brain because it's easy dopamine, Goggins, right? Whereas I need to just watching Goggins over and over again. It's like, it's not really doing what he's doing. So it's kind of one of those things around let's encourage open dialogue.
Well, the thing is, podcasts have been, a big part of, whether it's Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman or others, podcasts have been an important part of people's information. Institutions have dominated, and at that time, but then, on the back end, podcasts have been a platform for people to unearth.
Yes, that's right. And get that kind of, like you said, that longer form. Okay, let's see what you like. Let's go deep. Let's get to the edge of our knowledge.
Yeah,
because that's real fun.
Yeah.
You're opening yourself up to say some dumb stuff.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
I think other people expect it. And I think it was, I don't know if I got the timing right, but I think Trump jumped on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he sort of had this final leap when Joe Rogan sort of.
So they went there. Yeah. So they're it's good you mentioned that. I don't know if he won the election on long form content, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely, he did a tour on podcast where he went and spoke for a longer time frame now. Theo Vaughan. I don't think I've seen any politician in New Zealand really speak at length. And Chloe, I saw her go on that Gary
Economics,
yeah, and I was like, there was so much of what she said. I was like, I really want to get on board with you. And I'm actually keen to try and back you. In my head, I'm thinking this, and I'm watching this podcast, and then I'm like, but then there's these kind of statements that seem so idealistically focused that they kind of fall apart, and it's give me that level 2 thinking. I get your level 1 thinking. I love it. I'm aligned with it, but I need to see what's the action plan, and maybe it's something like 2 solutions focused. But I'm I really encourage. I'm encouraged to see more and more of that longer form content, but unfortunately we're all being kind of conditioned to have smaller content that's got actually less information in it.
I hope as the election year ramps up that we do see politicians front up in a more longer form content space. I know RNZ sort of have some sort of podcasty type content, but I don't think that's where the younger people would sort of be subscribing to RNZ platforms. And I think Luxon might have done one on the morning shift or something like that. But I would hope that politicians front up, because ultimately I think, again, building that institutional trust is really important, and we've got a really important election year. So,
and you kind of want to know the random stuff, right? It's actually an edge. If you go and expose yourself to a niche, you may not be the expert in, fly fishing, and you go on a fly fishing podcast, but you'd be surprised about that resonance you can get, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's taken for granted. Then again, it's a very difficult job.
I get it, but I suspect that those who are going to win in that space will have an advantage come this election cycle. I think we're just seeing the growth of New Zealand podcasts, because I've been listening to podcasts for a decade, for a long time, since the early days.
Did you ever get into Entrepreneur on Fire?
No.
That was my first podcast I got into.
Really?
I was a goldsmith. Goldsmiths, right, is not a glamorous job. It's pretty horrible. But you've got a lot of time to think. So I got into Entrepreneur on Fire, which was my first podcast, and then I got into This Week in Startups. And then the Tim Ferriss podcast, you would have done that. And then obviously Rogan's always been around.
He's been around. No, I've got a bit of a stable of podcasts, a mix of sort of comedy, sports, and entertainment and history. I'm a bit of one of those history sort of World War II. That's my Roman Empire.
I'm gonna end with a confronting kind of question, but I'm really inspired to hear your answer, and hopefully I don't put you in it. I get a sense that you really want to have an impact, and you feel a responsibility to do that. And I imagine that being half Pākehā and half Māori, that's an interesting dynamic and bridge you have to kind of close. What do you want to be remembered for in this role?
Awesome question. I had a good upbringing. I got to go to a half decent school, had a really sort of working class background, and but the majority of my cousins didn't. My mum did well for herself. She was a social worker, and again, sort of had that sort of blue collar sort of job. My dad was worked at Fisher and Paykel, and then became a taxi driver. So very working class. But that was, I grew up with a sense that I had a clear run relative to my cousins, but my cousins are me. We're just all the same. We come from the same grandparents. Why why did I get such a clear run in terms of social challenges, family challenges, economic challenges? And so I had an innate sense of responsibility, although wasn't the brightest kid. I was sort of smart enough, a bit of a talented in sort of lots of things to a varying degree. But I always had a sense of responsibility that it seemed to me unfair that my cousins suffered while I wasn't put on a pedestal or anything, but I got a clear run for me to explore and realize my potential, and that I always had a view that I would have to, or that I wanted to be of service of the realization of that potential. So, my career has been sort of 10 years in the corporate world, and I always knew that I would want to be in service. So, sort of task number one was sort of make the parents and sort of my grandparents proud, which I think have done. But ultimately, the impact I want to leave is I want to move the dial for our people, and that starts with me sort of doing it myself and demonstrating that through my career and otherwise. But now that I've got a platform both within this job, but also via the network and relationships that I've built over time, I've got the ability to influence others to share the mission, basically. And so it won't necessarily be what I achieve through, say, the asset holding company and the assets that I grow or the investments that we make, but it will, hopefully, the impact that I will leave will be more people committed to this this mission around supporting our people with their economic sovereignty, to give our people more options than what they have today. That's ultimately if we could have, a tenth or 20% of our population feel in 10 more times that they have more options, economic options on the table, that they're more economically sovereign in their own way, that would be success. And that won't be through what I do, but hopefully it's by me leveraging the relationships that I have and the skills and networks that I have to get people to galvanise around that same mission. Because I think what we can unlock with the potential of my people is good for both our northern region, our South Auckland region, where a lot of our people are. But we start to really support the country in some of those ways. So that's sort of the impact that I want to leave.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.